baptism of young folks. Now, the father of all models is George Box. And for those of you who have ever worked in any statistics, George Box is the grandfather and the guru. And as he says, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And we have to keep that in constant mind as we go through and do our analyses. It is too easy to punch the button on a computer and get a number and forget about it. So all models are not right, but all models are wrong, but some of them are useful. Now, in terms of recent work that's been done that I'm really excited about, this is the work of Ed Generosio at NASA Langley. And he has come up with an analysis method that looks at the PUD data, and he is able to look at the distribution of flaws and predict whether we have the behavior, the increasing behavior of signal with size, whether we have the right distribution of flaws that we have used to validate our PUD number, and also the added thing is he can tell you how many more flaws of a given size you need if you have failed the test. Some of the other models have said, well, you failed the test, but it doesn't tell you what to do about it. That's not very useful. So this is the next one, and this is called GoPod, and it's just hitting the streets for distribution. Pardon? Okay. Now, we did a lot of work in PUDs after that first declaration and after it was adopted by both NASA and the airport, and later by ASNT. And we generated a lot of data. And then it occurred to me that most of that data was going to be lost when I laid down in a box. So I said we need to document that in somewhat of a handbook, but it would be useless to document the numbers that we generated without describing the process that we went through to generate those and to make a permanent record of the actual data put in there. So with that, I generated a PUD data book, PUD capabilities data book, and there are 500 some data sets in that for various different NDE methods. And that even is just scratching the surface of what has been done and what needs to be done. It gives you an idea of what you might do if you go apply penetrant inspection in a given area. It doesn't answer all the questions because I had indicated that the smallest flaw is one of the things I usually get quoted for. I was asked at a penetrant training session by one of the executives of an engine company, well, we would like to get rid of developer in penetrant because it is messy and it requires a lot of extra money and so on. Do I really need to use developer? And of course, my answer was, well, only if you need to see flaws. So the PUD data book is available for the NTIAC, and I've left a copy here with the section. I can't tell you to copy it because it is copyrighted by NTIAC, but the data in it is not copyrightable, and I have released the copyright on the rest of it, so no problem in copying that as far as I'm concerned. The work then was documented for the first time, or a line in the sand created with Marshall specification 1249, in which they said, if you're going to do penetrant inspection and your flaw size is below some value, then you must demonstrate. And so that was the standard for many years. And that is unusual for NASA because one center doesn't like to reference what another center does, and yet they did it because it was the only thing there. Well, that was remedied a couple of years ago with the generation of the NASA standard 5009, And there is a 5014 that is not now in review, which tells you how to go about generating the data and how to use that. So we are making some progress in that area. We still characterize by 29 out of 29. But I always advise, if you're going to use 29 out of 29, that you make sure that you bracket with measurements on either side that represent the segment of flaw sizes that you need to have in your area. And if you don't have some linear or log linear relationship, then you need to go to a larger data set. NASA approach for shuttle then is we had standard NDE, that was generic best practice, and that's what we've done for materials. We had standard NDE that was supported by data, and that went into NASA 1249. If the critical flaw size is below the standard, or the item is factor critical by definition, and you had to designate it as special NDE and go demonstrate it. And the special NDE was therein. Now, once again, I've shown the integrated approach that we must deal with, and what I wanted to illustrate in this slide is that we need to work what is happening after I throw the article or the design over the wall. We need to think down the line how the article is going to be used, or we end up with something like the Tower of Pisa. There is a cartoon that goes with that I like, and that's the young man who is approaching the bishop at the Pisa church and said, "I can save 500 piastres if we don't do a soil test." Now we have some challenges. How good are your inspectors? How good do they have to be, or your inspections, not your inspectors. Your inspections, how good do they have to be? Do I have a margin of safety in there, or am I trying to push beyond the limit? Keep in mind that the procedure selling organizations, ASTM, SAE, AWS, ASME, those are not validated procedures. They are simply consensus documents, and they like to sell those, and they like to keep selling them. But the liability is that there's nothing that backs those up. A good thought in mind for those of you who do fluorescent penetrant inspection, will find in the ASTM document that your white light level in your inspection booth cannot be above 2-foot candles. If you've ever looked at a lighted room that is uniformly lit with 2-foot candles, you can read a newspaper. The reason that 2-foot candles is in there is because the time that original spec was generated, that was the lowest limit they could find a light meter that could read. And when you go back, that's not a validated reason for having that number in there. So that, be very careful of those. One-size-fits-all recipe is rarely true. And that's what all the consensus selling organizations are. And then my final item in this list is calibration. Now, calibration means a lot of things to a lot of different people. To the electronics people, that means going through and tweaking the resistors and the transistors and whatever, the pots, to bring it back to whatever the catalog says the instrument was supposed to be. In terms of NDT instruments, that's one of the worst things you can do. That's a liability, and it's not contributing at all to the measurements you need to do. So calibration, to many of you in this room, is setting up on a given notch, maybe setting it up with a given amplitude on that notch. Quite often the procedure will say then lower that threshold limit, or actually increase the amplifier gain, and go do the inspection. Well, keep in mind, first of all, that that is not a calibration. That does not give you any assurance of reproducibility, nor is consistent with what was originally established by the National Bureau of Standards, or what is now being